traditionally, the prophet emerges to warn people of things that are coming if they don't change their way of living, if they don't repent, or if they don't return to a more devoted life. That has been the tradition of the prophet. They don't come to, just kind of sprinkle fairy dust. Theirs is a task, and prophets are never, quote, welcomed in their homeland because they bring messages that are disrupting to the life of a particular society. Hi, everybody. It's time for another video, archetype video. This week, I decided to do the prophet archetype, which is one of those archetypes that no one ever lists in their 12 primary archetypes. If I was doing sacred contracts, I can't recall anyone ever telling me that they have the prophet archetype. It is an archetype, I suppose, that we consider more historic, more biblical. Actually, they were the biblical archetypes, the biblical prophets from the Old Testament and from the history of the Jewish tradition, which gave us this rich literature and teachings of the prophets. And then we have Muhammad, Prophet Muhammad. So the prophet is an archetype associated with being a messenger of God, being chosen to be a spokesperson for a divine message, not randomly picked. If you look at prophets and you look at their history, they're chosen, drafted, if you will, at times of great controversy and upheaval within the society in which they live. They come at a time of warning, like in Sodom and Gomorrah, of, a time of when the society is in a particularly vulnerable situation. This has historically been the case. Prophecy is a standalone category in terms of what is prophecy. What is it? I mean, just yesterday, something was sent to me about this prophecy that supposedly Padre Pio, a Catholic saint, predicted. And it dealt with, which is what inspired this video in the first place, 3 days of horrific darkness on the earth and blah, 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 all these horrible things that are going to happen. And it reminded me of, I'm not sure what they call it, where only so many thousands of people are going to be saved and this kind of thing. And I don't really think it was Padre Pio who said anything like that, because it would be so out of character for his messages as a rule. But every now and again, these prophecies of doom surface, and they tend to surface when society feels particularly vulnerable. I think about how many times the fundamentalist preachers have made prophecy type statements that the reason Katrina happened or the reason this happened was because people were bad or something is wrong with the society, and they make these ridiculous statements like that. Now, I just want to speak about prophecy, and I think the way heaven interacts, and that there really, I can't think of a contemporary prophet among us right now today, which is why it may be time to speak about the evolution of the prophet archetype and the evolution of prophecy, the calling of the prophet in a more modern way. Which brings me to a discussion of how your own intuition and guidance evolves. Now, prophets are people who are called to the task of prophecy. You can't sign up for it. You can't decide, I think I'm going to be a prophet. I mean, if you look at the history of people who have been prophets, they were pulled from their ordinary lives and they heard voices, or they had some kind of direct encounter. I'm not sure those kinds of direct encounters in that same way occur within our consciousness today, because we don't have that type of consciousness. We don't have that sort of receptivity. Instead, let me speak to you about your own intuitive system, because people still will seek out clairvoyants and psychics and people like this to see if they can get a reading on what the future holds for them, which is where the prophet, the whole role of the prophet comes in. Traditionally, the prophet emerges to warn people of things that are coming if they don't change their way of living, if they don't repent, or if they don't return to a more devoted life. That has been the tradition of the prophet. They don't come to, just kind of sprinkle fairy dust. Theirs is a task, and prophets are never, quote, welcomed in their homeland, because they bring messages that are disrupting to the life of a particular society. Now, I think that we are living in such a richly developing psychic intuitive age. I think this role of the prophet is not one that is conventionally seen anymore, but rather it may be merging into our way of life. Let me describe how intuition works so that you understand that kind of your wiring goes from one stage to another, and then there's the experience of being called. What does it mean to be called? So first of all, let's talk about this in 3 stages, like survival intuition, guidance, prophecy. I want you to think about that like job, career, vocation, or calling, that there is a progression. And at the job level of your intuition, another way to think of it is toilet water, cologne, and perfume. At the job level of your intuition, it functions like just survival gut intuition. It's organic. It's what I call organic divinity. It doesn't, your survival intuition, your gut instincts have, excuse me, have nothing to do with whether or not you're an atheist, agnostic, believer, druid, Martian. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We're wired. We are wired to have this inner metronome that tells us this is right, this is wrong, don't eat this, eat that, don't walk on this bridge, don't trust this, trust that. It is a survival instinct. It is part of the energetic biospiritual ecology of your body. And it's wired to the larger survival atmosphere around you that you may or may not consider conscious or sacred. That's up to you. But you are always, always receiving survival gut information all the time. It doesn't matter how conscious you are of it. It doesn't matter if you're a good person, a bad person. It doesn't matter. You're just wired for this. And this is that basic survival, intuitive, basic nature that is the human structure. Guidance is a different level entirely. What happens in the normal progression, well, I don't know if the word normal is, I don't know if that's the right word anymore. Let's just say in a normal spiritual progression, and I don't mean religious by any means, I mean in the normal progression of consciousness, eventually, the nature of consciousness is to pursue questions about what am I going to do with my life? I wonder for what purpose was I born? What is the meaning and purpose of my life? What am I doing here? And so we want to go from job to career, from gut instinct to guidance. When you think about a job, you think a job is what we have to do to survive. Take a job, do anything, be a dog walker, be this, be that, be that. But the thing about consciousness at the job level is that it is the most powerless in terms of you feeling that you are an agent of power, that you are an agent of change. Instead, you may think, I am just earning an hourly income. I am just surviving. And so this survival consciousness has a way of influencing your rapport with your own intuitive capacities and your rapport with your creativity and your rapport with thinking, is there a reason that I was born to give something instead of just trying to survive? And that is the job level. And so as we all know, at some point, if you want to progress to a career, it requires that you decide, I need an education, I need skills, I need to tool up, I need to learn something that could help me engage my power in a productive way in the world. So you move to the career stage. And at that stage, you are tooling up. You're advancing you become an electrician, you become an engineer, whatever it is. But in that transformation of yourself, from thinking I just have to take orders to, maybe I can participate in the society in which I live. This is a whole advancement of self-esteem. This is a sense that I have other resources in me. And you move to like the cologne level, the career level, this level, and it's at that level that the more sophisticated questions of meaning and purpose begin to germinate in you and begin to incubate in you. And you begin to wonder, what do I want from life? How do I want to experience life? Maybe the thought starts happening. Maybe I want to see other places. Maybe I'm not bound by where I was born, or bound by my body, or bound by my sexuality, or whatever it is. You start taking off and shedding restrictions that would hold you in place at the toilet water or cologne level. And this is reflected in your rapport with your own gut instincts that begin to speak differently to you. So rather than just focusing on basic survival, you start getting more creative because you've warehoused skills and developed skills, and you start wondering about relationships in a larger sphere and how to relate. And you start relating to yourself very differently. And it's at this stage that people begin the healing journey. Oftentimes, they become aware that they have an inner world. The inner self begins to make itself known in a way that doesn't happen when the focus is more primal. The inner self starts to emerge, and questions of purpose, meaning, questions that cannot be answered by ordinary means. Rather, guidance is required. A different type of knowledge is required, a different type of information. Because how many people can, I've taught for decades now, decades, and I've had, I don't know how many conversations with people who've said, I don't know what I'm doing here. What's the purpose of my life? That is not a question that I can answer for anybody. It is a question that I can direct people in terms of where to go within themselves. But if I said to someone, well, you know what the purpose of your life is? I think the purpose of your life is to be a nice person and to learn how to become a superb baker. Nobody is going to take my advice and then base their whole life on that, nor should they. When you start generating these inner questions, they can only be answered by you, because here's what's true. Truth, actually. When you begin to ask questions like, for what reason have I been born? I mean, what am I doing here? That's not a question, it's a prayer. It's actually a prayer. What you're saying is, take me down deep and reveal to me the reason you gave me life. What am I doing alive now in this time of great change and chaos, opportunity and growth that is absolutely extraordinary? Why have I arrived here? What do you want me to do with this life that you've given me? No human being can answer that. I could guide you, but I can't answer it. The answer has to come from you. And this is where you turn to a kind of guidance that says, what am I doing here? Help me out. Now, what's important really to grasp at this point, and again, we're now into the nature of prophecy. Prophecy is not knowledge of sacred scripture or knowledge of um, science, or because it's not. It is irrational. It is not gleaned from your five senses. A prophetic hit comes out of nowhere, and it's not related necessarily to anything you're looking at or thinking about. It just, bam, downloads. And this is very typical of a high level intuitive hit. It's not related to anything. Now, what is required, or shall I say helpful, is that you have advanced your relationship with yourself in such a way that you trust your wiring. You trust your inner nature. You trust the strength and clarity of your inner self, which is something that you have to earn, which brings up the subject of faith. Now, when I'm talking faith, I am not talking religion. I will never talk religion unless I do it historically. When I'm talking faith, I'm talking about a coin, faith and trust, they go together. And that it is extraordinarily difficult to trust that there's anything conscious in the outside world if you don't have faith and trust in yourself. Faith and trust and guidance and the inner life go together. And they go together. And what I oftentimes say to people and instruct them in terms of developing this part of themselves is that start out with developing a trusting and faithful relationship with yourself, not with anybody else, not with anyone else, not with looking at people and saying, excuse me, you disappointed me. I can't trust you. I don't have faith in you anymore, blah, blah, blah. That's not your role. Your role is to develop faith in yourself. And you do this simply by doing small things consistently, like you don't break your word to yourself. So if you say, for example, you know what, I need to cut back on sugar or salt, whatever, you make that promise to yourself and you don't break it, no matter how difficult, because it's not about your diet, it's not about losing weight, it is about making a commitment to yourself and keeping it and earning respect of yourself, earning faith in your own word, so that when you say to yourself, you're not going to do that anymore. Do not lose your power to this. You've developed a respect for the power of your word. And when you give your word to yourself, you keep it. And if you keep your word to yourself, you learn to trust that word. Because what happens is you start developing a sense of self-respect and self-esteem that comes from this relationship you forged with yourself. How often in these years, because self-esteem is such an important part of our health and well-being, that people think self-esteem is about being able to tell other people, you can't talk to me that way, you can't do this, you can blah, 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 blah. And that has nothing to do with it. That's just blah. True self-esteem, to esteem oneself, is to develop this deep respect and rapport for your own word, for your own power that you've earned, that you've actually, so you know that when you say to yourself, be still. If you can't say something kind, don't say anything. You know that you are in charge of your power, that you are completely in charge. And then if somebody says something like, I'm telling you, the sky is falling and the world's going to go dark in 3 days, and yada, 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 you say to yourself, you command yourself, be still and listen very carefully to your inside. Is that what your inner guidance is telling you? Discernment. And the grace of discernment comes through and you realize that is hysterics and I'm not attaching to that. What in Taoism, I'm not attaching to that spectacle. It's not coming near me. This is the kind of strength that comes. You earn it. You earn it. And as you earn this, and as you get used to this kind of inner rapport with yourself, you start relying on your guidance. And from that, you might even begin a dialogue that says, I need help. I need to know what to do. And then you get a feeling. You get a feeling that is now familiar, that says, do this, don't do this. And now you trust it. You didn't trust it before because you were used to asking other people, should I do this? What do you think? Should I do this? Da, 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 da. Turning your power over to others. But now you've earned this sense of rapport because nobody knows your journey more than your soul. Nobody knows your journey more than your soul. And from that, you build this kind of rapport. And this is where inner guidance begins to come from. Now, where does prophecy? Inner guidance can begin to expand, and it can move from personal guidance to impersonal, to guidance that has nothing to do with you. But you begin to understand or envision or see, perceive things, dynamics that are in the atmosphere that are on their way into creation. Now, this is a big statement, and maybe it requires a video all to itself. But the way creation works, how do I even go? Oh my God, what Pandora's box have I opened? You know, one of the reasons I don't do readings anymore is because there's nothing simple about the power of you. You are much more complex, not complicated, but complex. And I have learned to respect and hold in high regard the power of every choice you make. And I'm not privy to every choice you make any more than you are, any more than I am to my own choices. All I know now is that we are constantly in motion. We are a life system in motion, and we're constantly thinking and responding emotionally, intuitively, spiritually, psychically, at every level of our being. And some of the levels in which we exist are bound to this life and some are not. And I don't even know where to go with all of that, except that I know we're that big. And that creation, what gets created, what we actually experience. It's like a coming together of endless choices that then manifest in a moment, in an experience, in a meeting, in a illness, in a this and a that. But it's never just one thread, any more than you can look at anything in the outside world and say that only one thing caused it. There's no such thing as one cause for any one event. Nothing, which is why knowing history is so valuable. Which is why knowing your history is so valuable for me if I'm ever trying to help you with something. It does it because there's so much to you. There's so much to you. Which is why I remember this one time doing a reading with Norm. And I said to Norm, this man has pancreatic cancer. And Norm said, no, he doesn't. I tested him for that. And I said, no, that's the only thing I see. That's all I can see is that he is. But Norm had just put him through the test for pancreatic cancer. Well, 2 weeks later, Norm and I were at a conference, and Norm received a phone call that the man was in the hospital for full pancreatic cancer. It had just exploded, just came into form. And it was that reading and a few others like that that really began to unveil for me how creation kind of works, like mist going into rain and eventually solidifying in ice. That when our choices are at the mist level, we can influence them. But then the mist begins to form rain clouds and it starts to rain, and still with rain, there's a bit of an influence, but not much. But then it's obvious it's going to pour. And at that point, it's obvious that when the temperature drops, it'll be ice. And that's kind of like the power of our choices, that we have multiple choices until we make so many that they begin to solidify. And I think that's where the third level, the perfume level, the prophecy level, is a level of sight where a person can see what is being created by the collection of choices people are making that are solidifying within the society. Now, people are called to that rank. That even Teresa of Avila said, when she was describing her mansions, the mansions of the soul, and she said the fourth mansion, which is the heart, and the upper regions, or the deeper regions, I should say. She didn't refer to the chakras, she just said the fourth. She said she had to be called to that. She couldn't access that territory in herself without divine escort. In that same way, I think that level of awareness or consciousness is so profound that it's cosmic in nature, and that we are escorted into that realm. We don't access that by ourselves. I think the realm of prophecy most certainly exists. I think it's rare to get there. But I think that in order for a visionary to not implode, that what is required is a profound degree of faith in yourself, in your own self-awareness that what you're seeing has spiritual validity to it. Most often, I will leave you with my encouragement to develop an inner rapport with yourself in terms of faith and trust in your own intuitive guidance system, and to say that I think it's entirely possible these days that as you develop that and you make the shift from only focusing on yourself personally to developing impersonal consciousness, impersonal, cosmic, impersonal, larger than yourself. Here's an example. Instead of saying, what's my life all about? You just say, what's life all about? And how do I fit in? A completely different version of that question, where the focus is on understanding the nature of life and fitting in instead of thinking that life should fit into you and serve you. Completely different version. It's one in which you see yourself as the servant instead of someone to be served. It's this level of maturity that changes the channel inside yourself. Okay, so my last little thing that I'll say is avoid street psychics at all costs. And I'll tell you why. Because, once somebody tells you something, you can't get it out of your head. And what if they told you the worst thing you'd ever want to hear? You can't. Be careful. Be careful out there. It's better that you go for your own guidance. Your own. Go directly to the source. Okay, everyone. Thank you.